Welcome to the Mango Monkey Show. My name is Mango Monkey. What are the risks in buying an off-the-plan apartment? Is it still a good idea? Today, we will explore some of the benefits and potential pitfalls of buying an off-the-plan apartment. Firstly, what is an off-the-plan apartment or an off-the-plan property? Is where you essentially pay a deposit for a property that's not already completed. Normally, it will take 1 or 2 years for the property to be completed and ready for you to move into. It's different from a house and land package. With a house and land package, what happens is you get the loan at the start. Normally, when you sign the building contract, the bank approves the loan for you. However, with an off-the-plan property, the bank doesn't approve the loan until 1 or 2 years later, when the property is finished. The reason is that with off-the-plan property, the bank transfers all the money in one hit. So if your property is 600,000, the bank pays 600,000 in one hit to the seller 1 or 2 years later. But with a construction loan, the bank pays a little bit of money every now and then. So for example, the bank may pay 200,000 or 300,000 for the piece of land, and then perhaps another 100,000 when a portion of the construction has been completed, and then another 100,000 after that, and so on. Okay, so let's go back to the benefits and potential pitfalls. We'll start with the benefits. Benefit number 1. You can potentially lock in your purchase with a small deposit. So usually you need to have at least 4% deposit to buy your first home. With an off-the-plan property, I have seen some sellers accept as little as 2.5% deposit. So that means you can actually sign the contract to buy the property today, even though you don't have 5%. And hopefully in the next 1 or 2 years, you would have had 5%. Benefit number 2. You can actually ride the property wave, ride the snowball effect. Remember I told you property grows like a snowball. If the snowball goes down the hill, the more it rolls, the bigger it gets. When you buy this off-the-plan apartment today, you lock in the price, but you don't actually have to settle on it. You don't have to transfer the rest of the money until 2 years later. During that time, the price of the property should have gone up. So you get today's price even though you pay for it 2 years later. That could be very good for you. Sometimes you can even resell the apartment before it's finished. So for example, you put down $30,000 deposit today, you buy it for $600,000, sign the contract, and then you sell it 2 years later for $700,000, and that way you make $100,000 less some costs, and perhaps the stamp duty, which is around $22,000 in New South Wales. And you could potentially do all of these things before you actually need to pay for that property if you could actually find another buyer. So potentially, even if you don't have a home loan approval, you could do this kind of thing if you are lucky. Benefit number 3. It's super easy to buy. I cannot stress this enough. It's really easy to buy an off-the-plan property. There's a price list. You go into the display suite, you choose what you want to buy, and that's basically it. The salesperson is usually really friendly to you. Sometimes they even pretend to want to help you. They want to help you grow wealth, formulate some kind of financial plan for you. Often could be a pretty girl as well. It's a very enjoyable shopping experience. So normally you need to give them a bit of a holding deposit, which could be $5,000, and then you get your solicitor or conveyancer to review the contract, and then you sign the contract and exchange it. After you sign the contract, usually you pay the remaining of the deposit. So normally I would say at least 2.5%, but it does depend, you can negotiate with them. On the other hand, if you're buying a second-hand property, usually you're competing with many other people who want to buy the same thing. So you cannot really do a holding deposit usually, or at least you cannot hold it for too long. Now benefit number 4, there are a lot of choices. Off-the-plan apartments are usually in the high-rise apartment building. So if the unit you want has been sold, there's always another one next to it. And if that one has been sold, either there's another one above it or below it. So it's very easy to not miss out. Okay, so what are the potential pitfalls? Well, pitfall number 1. Your home loan pre-approval is just that, it's a pre-approval. It doesn't mean it will get approved 1 or 2 years later when the property is actually finished and ready for you to move into. You still need to meet the lending policies applicable around 2 years later. Sometimes after 2 years, the bank may give you more money or less money. Even if your income is still the same, your expenses is still the same, and everything else is still the same. But also your financial situation may have changed in 2 years, right? You may be single today, but you may be married 2 years later, and your wife may not actually be working. This will reduce your borrowing power significantly. Or you may have a baby. It will increase your expenses and reduce your borrowing power as well. Let's talk about the deposit. So you can get started with potentially a deposit of only 2.5%. So that means you need to pay a little bit more deposit, maybe another 2.5% in a couple of years. Can you actually get that deposit in a couple of years? You may think it's possible, but you don't know what will happen in 2 years. You may need to use it maybe for your family who gets sick or some other reason. You may be offered a very nice job. Your agent told you that the property will not settle for another 6 months when you get that job offer. You take up that new job, but suddenly your agent tells you that you need to settle on this home purchase in 3 months. Now you may be screwed if your bank doesn't like your employment stability. Or if you are still in the same job, what if your income is made up of a few components? So in lending, there are certain components that the bank look at. There's what's called the base salary. That's the portion of your salary which is exactly the same every single week. There's also overtime, which is where you work more than your standard hours, you get paid a bit more. There's also penalty rates, there's commission if you're in the sales role. Normally when you sell something you get commission, so this amount depends on how much you sell, how well you do. And there's also bonus, which normally gets paid once a year. Now with bonus, generally speaking, if you change your job within the last 2 years, you haven't been paid 2 years worth of bonus, usually the bank doesn't count the bonus. So you want to stick to that job. So with regards to commission, different banks look at different periods of time. There will be some that look at the last 6 months, some others look at the last couple of years. Well, if your commission is not the same every time you get paid, what if around the time that you need to settle on this property purchase, your commission is a bit less, then you may not be able to get enough loan amount. Now another risk with an off-the-plan property purchase is that when you need to settle on that property purchase, when you need to transfer the balance of the money, the bank will need to value the property. So in an up market, usually the value of the property is the same as what you purchased it for, but in a down market, it could actually be lower. So if you're buying with a 5% deposit, normally the way the banks looks at it is that you need to contribute enough deposits so that you only borrow 95% of the property value. So if the property value goes down by $10,000, generally speaking, you need to contribute extra $9,500 on top of the deposit that you were meant to contribute based on the 5% calculation. Now, this valuation figure, you normally only find out about it 1 or 2 weeks before the deadline for the settlement, because before then the property was not ready. The bank cannot determine the value. Who can come up with $9,500 within 1 or 2 weeks? It's very difficult, right? So unless you have a lot of savings, it's not a good idea to buy something that's off the plan apartment. Okay, so in summary, your family life and your working life both need to be very simple for you to be comfortable purchasing a property that's off the plan. Or you need to have a lot of backup savings. Maybe your parents have a lot of money and wouldn't mind helping you out if something goes wrong, if something goes messy. I would say that if you know you will definitely not have kids in the next 2 or 3 years, your salary is only consisting of base salary, the same amount every single week, and you have maybe a 20% deposit, it's okay for you to buy an off-the-plan apartment. You have a lot of buffer if things go wrong. But if your income is up and down, it has some commission component, has some overtime component, I think it's a little bit risky. Okay, so that's about you, about yourself. Now I will talk about the risk inherent in the property itself. Pitfall number 2. There's something called a sunset clause. What is the sunset clause? An off-the-plan property is usually sold with a clause which is called a sunset clause. This means if there are delays with council approval, there are a lot of rain and the construction gets delayed, there's another coronavirus pandemic, the construction cannot proceed because there's a lockdown, the developer can decide not to sell the property to you anymore for that price. This is because the developer incurs more costs to build the property. They pay more interest to their bank, more salaries to the employees, the construction workers, and so on. You will get your deposit back, don't worry, you will get it back. But by that time it's 2 years later, right? It's 2 years since you paid the deposit and purchased the property. So you put your life on hold for 2 years or sometimes more than that, only to find out the property is not being sold to you anymore. You then need to find another home or buy the same one again at a higher price. Sometimes it happens, they sell you the exact same home for a higher price. So by that time the property market has gone up heaps. It's been a couple of years. Your deposit that you had, the 5% deposit that you had before, may not be enough anymore. Okay, so pitfall number 3. So this one, I don't know the name for it, but the developer is legally allowed to sell you a finished product which is a little bit different from the one originally advertised. For example, the quality of the finishes may be a bit lower, the internal area of your apartment may be a bit smaller. If the change is considered not material, there's basically nothing you can do about it. You cannot get your deposit back. You have to proceed with the purchase. Pitfall number 4. Pitfall number 4 is building issues. Usually it takes a few years for building issues to become apparent. There were some issues in the Opal Tower in the Sydney Olympic Park, you may know. These apartment units are now worth a fraction of what they were purchased for. The builder normally offers a 6-year warranty when you buy a brand new apartment. Check with your solicitor, I could be wrong. But even if they have a 6-year warranty, what if the builder company doesn't exist anymore in 6 years? It's quite possible that the warranty is useless. You may not be able to get anyone to actually fix the problem for you. Okay, so what do you think, guys? Should you buy off the plan or not? Leave your comments here and don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.